Greetings, everyone. I'd like to call to order the July 8th meeting of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. Before we begin, I need to read a statement. Due to the governor and mayoral emergency orders, the Urbana City Council chambers will not be open to the public during this meeting. Commission members will meet remotely using Zoom webinar. Anyone can watch the meeting on streaming services, UPTV, or attend virtually via Zoom webinar. Commissioner Pete Resnick is physically present in the council chambers. And please remember that all our votes will be roll call votes. Another requirement. Okay. So can we have a roll call, please?
Carol Bradford.
Here.
Stacy Burnett. Florence Caplow. Lolita Dumas.
Here.
Oh, great.
Daniel
Hi,
Larson.
Hi.
No Daniel Larson. Lisa Mosley.
Here.
Peter Resnick.
Here.
Francis Rigberg.
Here. Well, we have a quorum, and that's very good. Now we have our agenda for tonight. Does anyone have any change they wish or addition they wish to make? I'll take a motion for approval of the agenda.
Motion.
Moved.
Okay, and who will second it?
I'll second.
Okay, now we'll have to have a roll call vote. So,
Carol Bradford.
thank you.
I approve.
Stacy Burnett. Lolita Dumas.
I approve.
Lisa Mosley.
I approve.
Peter Resnick.
Aye.
Francis Rigberg.
Aye. Okay, the agenda is approved. Now we have our minutes from our last meeting of June 12th. And would anybody like to move for approval of these minutes?
I move that we approve the meetings from June 2020.
Second? Would someone like to second?
I wasn't at the meeting. Is it okay for me to second?
Sure.
Okay. I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion or any corrections anyone would like to make? Okay, now we require a roll call vote on the approval of the minutes.
Carol Bradford.
I approve.
Lolita Dumas.
I approve.
Lisa Mosley.
I approve.
Peter Resnick.
Aye.
Francis Rigberg.
Approved. We have approval of the minutes. Public participation. I see Mr. Hansen would like to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Christopher Hansen. I've lived in Urbana for 18 years now. I think maybe all of you have become somewhat familiar with my name since we had this appeal recently of the HRC and involving James Simon and everyone and Mr. Resnick. I just want to repeat some of the things that I've brought up at past meetings. It is my feeling that the HRC is not very effective in its stated intent or mission. It's not clear to me at all what the board is doing for the community. I brought some pretty significant problems to your attention, and they've basically been ignored. And it doesn't seem clear to me that anyone intends to do anything about it. I've seen now, dozens of letters from our city administrator, Carol Mitten, indicating that Vasilia Clark simply isn't doing her job. And we know she's discriminating in terms of HRC and police complaints. It's just very clear, and no one wants to talk about it. And I think it's because, I guess maybe your board is just there for kind of for show, just to have kind of a friendly sounding, flowery language in our city ordinance. And I'm wondering, why are you guys on the board? Like, why are you here? What do you think it is that you're getting done? I mean, I think at your last meeting, you guys talked about advertising on billboards or buses. And I was sitting there listening to this meeting, like, you know, just face palming the whole time. It's like, why are you advertising your services if your services are meaningless to the residents of Urbana? It's so strange. It's bizarre. Why would you ignore such a significant problem? Why would you not want to dig into it and go further? I've been discussing this with other residents as well, neighbors and stuff, and the general feeling, the general consensus is that the HRC is not functional and it's not meaningful for Urbana residents. And it really is just about having a flowery sounding ordinance that doesn't actually do anything for anyone. And I'd like to hear you guys, instead of kind of just glancing past me, I'd like to hear you actually discuss this in a substantive way that is meaningful for the people listening. And it's tiring, it's exhausting. I guess if your stance is to kind of just ignore the issue because it's difficult and it's too hard to approach, then we need to make sure that no residents ever waste their time submitting HRC complaints, because they'll just come out of the process more upset and more damaged than they were going into it. And it is not my interest to see my neighbors and my friends go through that. So please, let's have a real discussion about it. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. I'd like to remind you that the one complaint that you actually brought to the body you're addressing right now was investigated, and it was determined and appealed and affirmed by that appeal that it is out of our jurisdiction, and there are ways to address that problem, but the one way you chose is simply not appropriate. So, and also we are not CPRB, so please don't lump us in our problems and their problems together, or your concerns with them and your concerns with us. And I would also like to state that many complaints that have been brought to our Human Relations Office have been solved successfully. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Moving on. We have unfinished business. We have the publicity campaign on housing, and that initiative has been completed. We have our billboard up, we have our bus signs up, and it's all been taken care of and come out of our 2020 fiscal year budget. And we came in under budget, and if all goes well, and we and this makes a difference to people in the community, maybe we can do more and build on that campaign. I'd like to request that when phone calls now come into the Human Relations Office, I'm not sure who takes them, I'll probably sometimes Tamara, sometimes Cecilia, that you could, if it's not too awkward, ask people how they heard about the commission so we can determine whether our outreach has had any measurable effect. So I would appreciate that.
I can certainly do that if
That'd
I
be great.
receive any calls.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to, oh, excuse me, one more thing. I would like to propose to the commission that we look into documentary films, and I have sent a list to you all of the ones I recommend that would be good for educational and inspiring, perhaps, to people in the community, to be aired on UPTV, that are documentaries that address seeing others, the humanity in others, and alternative ways to resolve social conflict. And to do that, I would want to work with UPTV to make that happen. But I'd like to see how the commission feels about that and if there's support for that. Anybody have anything to say about that?
This is Carol, and
Yes.
I saw your list, and I'm wondering how you put that list together.
Mhm.
And I think it would also be appropriate if we are given time to, there's 3 of them that I've seen, but the others I haven't. So I don't feel comfortable approving all of those on the list because I haven't seen them all. So I would want the opportunity to look at some of the others
Good point.
before making a determination. But I do like the idea of it. I think it's important because the more that people can educate themselves and expand their experiences, sometimes are limited. So seeing things from other people's points of views and what others have experienced can be helpful. So I like the idea of it. I think if it's going to come out as being from the Urbana Human Relations Commission, it's going to be very important that we've seen the documentary. So I don't know if we want to divide and conquer or what that would look like. But like I said, there were only some of them I knew about, but I have not had a chance to see. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But I do think it's very important to educate the public, those that are at least willing and open to learning. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Carol. That's very important. That's very good input for me. I first put this list together several years ago, and when I went several years ago on the commission, because we were reaching out. Lisa and I were on a sort of a subcommittee to reach out, and I was originally thinking that we would show these at the city building and have panel discussions and things like that. That's not really possible anymore. And I'm not especially tied to these particular films, although I do like them very much. And I would not go ahead with anything that everyone hadn't seen and felt good about doing. So maybe that's all we need to say at this time. Anybody else have a comment? I see that Christopher has raised his hand. Christopher? I think it says you raised your hand.
And that was during public participation, I think.
Okay, he had his, oh, I'm sorry. It's a leftover. Okay. Okie doke. Now we go on to.
Sorry, this is Olita. I did have a comment as well. It's kind
Yes,
of
sure.
similar to Carol. I did like the diversity of readings that you had. So I did like that about it, but similar to Carol, I wasn't familiar with all of them. So I kind of do like the idea of like divide and conquer to kind of like look at the list, but I did like the diversity of readings that you had on there.
Great.
And I do agree that we should all kind of, have some familiarity with all of them before we put out a list. But I did like the diversity that you had on there. I thought that was really pretty good.
Thanks, Olivia. Thank you. And does anyone else have anything to say? Okay, moving on to the ordinance. Pete?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance this month to catch up with Dan and work with him on this. I did a bit of spelunking on my own into the history of the ordinance to sort of see how we ended up where we were, which I recommend for amusement's sake, but it's interesting to go through all of the changes over the years. So there are 2 areas that I think we want to propose adjustments to for the mayor and the city council. The easy one is cleaning up the procedures that Mr. Hansen ran into with regard to how jurisdiction questions get handled and how appeals get handled. And part of it was that it's just not very clear. Clearly some stuff was added later and it didn't adjust all of the procedures to go with it. So I've already got some stuff written up. I want to go over with them with Dan, make sure we've got a handle on that. But I think that's the easy set of cases. And it'll be, it'll clarify when Vasilia needs to send out particular notices, what kinds of notices for each case and all that. So I think that will be satisfactory to everybody. The other set of cases, which came up during this hearing, but this appeal, but have come up before, is the issue of whether the city of Urbana is covered by Article 3 of the ordinance, which is, violating the ordinance. I came up with some language to clean up if we go down the route of recommending that it not be subject to the ordinance. And that's a pretty easy cleanup. My going over stuff, I think there are ways to make it such that the city could be subject to the ordinance. It would be a little more complicated procedurally. And again, not having spoken with Dan yet, my gut is that we do the work of writing up what changes would be required to make that happen, and then leave it to the city, leave it to the city council and the mayor to decide how they want to go forward. Give them the opportunity and say, if you want to go down this path, here are the advantages, here are the disadvantages. If you want to go down this other path, same thing, but make the choice theirs, unless we have a strong opinion one way or the other, and we can voice that opinion separately. So I wanted to sort of get feedback on whether that's the right path to keep going down, or if anybody had any suggestions for different things or different ways to look into this.
Carol.
Okay, sorry about that. I wasn't sure if I needed to raise my hand electronically or, or show my hand. So first of all, I haven't commented on any of the emails that were sent to us intentionally, but I have read all of them. So I read Mr. Hansen's complaint, I read all of the replies, the information from the attorney, and I agree with Peter that it needs to be cleaned up, what the proper procedure is. My concern is that I think as a commissioner, I would feel really awkward having to be involved in some type of hearing or review of a city official. I don't know what their other options are, but I think that it would be really important that whatever the option is, it's very clear to the public what steps they need to take if they have a concern about a city official. My concern is that I think there would be a conflict of interest because we work with city staff. And so in all fairness to the person who wages a complaint, whether valid or not, and to keep the integrity of our body and not have it be questioned by the public, I feel like it should be handled in a way that's separate from the role of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. And that's just my personal opinion, but also based on some experience in my professional life. I think it's just really important to separate those two out. Because I'll be honest with, if you work with people closely, you get to know them, you develop personal, professional relationships, and it would be very hard to separate, for me, I'm only speaking for me, it would be very hard to separate my personal feelings towards the city staff and be able to approach this from a very neutral stance. So that's just, again, my 2 cents. But I really think for the city, it would look cleaner. It would take away the perception of something not being right. Sometimes you can have the best intentions in the world, and things can be on the up and up, but if it gives the perception that something may not be done or handled properly, it's still going to cause issues. And we are tasked with trying to help people deal with some of the most sensitive issues in our community. And it's going to be very important that those individuals in the community trust us to be able to do that. And so I don't think that we should be involved in any type of complaint process involving city officials who oversee and kind of govern what we do, for lack of a better term. So that's my 2 cents. I'll shut up and let somebody else get a chance to speak.
Thank you so much, Carol.
So if I may comment on some of the things that Carol was talking about, because one of the things I did as far as research on this was to look at how the Illinois Department of Human Rights and the Illinois Human Rights Commission works this. Because in the Illinois Human Rights Act, Illinois Human Rights Act, if I can get my mouth to work, they do allow you to bring a complaint against a government official in the state of Illinois, be it the state, a state official or a municipal, local, whatever official, any official in the state of Illinois. They have 2 things that sort of make this possible. Well, they have a few things that make this possible. One is their sheer size. They are a very big separate department. And so there is a little more independence. There's not as much, you are bound to find an investigator who hasn't had contact with this or that particular person in government. And so that's a little bit more plausible. The other couple of things that they have is that the state does not bring the case before the Human Rights Commission. The complainant brings it themselves, and they are responsible if they want to hire a lawyer to do that, but they bring the complaint themselves. Whereas in our case, the city normally brings the complaint. So we would have to come up with some other way for a person to bring a complaint. Now, everybody does, if you get through that process and probable cause is found, they do bring it before the Illinois Human Rights Commission. Those folks are, of course, appointed by, I assume the governor or other state officials. They are supposedly independent and allowed to do their thing. We are effectively the same. We are appointed by the mayor. I think Carol's right. We have a little more personal tie in with city officials just because, that's the nature of a small city. And we have a small enough group of folks doing kinds of investigations that it makes it a little difficult. I'm ambivalent about it. I would like to think that there would be some way for folks to say, this isn't just an HR complaint I'm bringing, that this person just isn't doing their job, but this person or this department or whatever it is in fact discriminating. And be able to bring that particular thing to us if they couldn't reconcile it with the city itself. But it may be too tricky for us to handle. Still, my inclination is to write up what would be required to make that happen and have us say, yep, if we were going to take that on, here's what would make that happen, whether or not we think it's a terribly good idea or not. And, maybe say, we're not sure that this is going to work, but we want to present it to you as a possibility.
Thank you, Pete.
Can I
Anybody else?
ask a question?
Sure.
So Pete, you and Carol both, you brought up a really good point as far as conflict of interest. Since I've been on the commission, I also know, I think it came to our attention early on in my training that we would not be overseeing city officials, but also we also don't take on complaints from the University of Illinois because they have another venue. And I think this fits this category. There's a reason we would not investigate that. Not to say that it shouldn't be or whatever. And Pete, your point to clarifying, I just think the public needs to understand that as well. It's not like we're shirking our duties or we're looking the other way. There's a reason for it not to be a conflict of interest. I think, Carol, you said it best. So just pointing out that we do not oversee every person that works in Urbana or every agency or company or institution when you think of the University of Illinois. So that's my
It's like we can't right every wrong unless it falls under our ordinance.
Although
And that's what, yes, go ahead.
I do want to point out to Lisa that the reason for the university, and I think this is across the board, the exceptions are definitely written in terms of other government agencies, where we wouldn't have jurisdiction because we can't go after the state of Illinois, which is what the University of Illinois is in effect. We can't go after a federal employee who happens to work at the IRS office locally. That those are the responsibility of other government agencies and we can't go after them. But all other businesses, organizations, we do have jurisdiction over. And the funny one is in the original 1975 ordinance, we did specifically have jurisdiction over the University of Illinois. I expect that something bad happened and they figured out we can't do that.
Interesting. Well,
For the
why
public, they need to know that there is still a recourse. It's just not us.
exactly. That's what I tried to say to Mr. Hansen when yes, Carol. Carol, go ahead.
Thank you. So I want to just reiterate, being a person of color, coming from a minority community, it's very difficult for us to trust systems. And in order to gain that trust and keep it, again, we have to make sure that the people in our community recognize us as a separate entity that's going to be fair. Not that any of us would not be fair and not be honest and hear all the evidence and make decisions based on our best judgment. But again, it's the appearance sometimes of something not being okay that can do a lot of damage to that image, and that the goal we have is to make sure that every single individual in our community feels that we are neutral and unbiased, and that we are going to hear their concerns, and we are going to be fair in our determinations. It doesn't matter how strongly we all feel that we're wonderful human beings and we would do that. If the perception is out there that that's not happening or might not happen, then we're not able to really do what it is we do for the community, and that we've done for years. Even before I joined the commission, I would hear about people taking issues and they felt like they were addressed. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. It's not that I don't think we can do it, and we're all wonderful people. And I think we're all doing and we're all doing this because it's something we feel very strongly about, and that, is part of our advocacy and our own personal commitments. So I just wanted to reiterate that I think, could we do it? Yes. Would we be great at it and be fair and neutral and all those good things? Yes. I still think that if we don't allow the city to come up with some other alternative option where it's separated out from this body, that could be do some irreversible damage as far as the public trusting us.
Yes, Pete.
I think Carol's point is incredibly well taken, and I appreciate that. That made it much clearer for me. One thing, Carol is talking about having a mechanism to deal with these things, which I think is important. One thing that was mentioned was that there are these other avenues. one of the things that is kind of special about our setup is that the person who's bringing the complaint doesn't need a lawyer. In fact, they don't have to show up really. It's the city of Urbana versus the respondent, not the complainant. And that's not true at the state level, which is sort of the other venue that's available. You've got to bring your own lawyer. You've got to bring the complaint. You've got to, come and prosecute the case or bring it to court. So yeah, but I absolutely agree. If anything we do is going to reduce our credibility in the eyes of the public, I think Carol's spot on. We don't want to do.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else to add or questions for Pete?
I think I just wanted to add, it sounds like Pete, and just what you just said, I think another component to that is to make sure that it's as seamless as possible. Because just when Carol was mentioning about, that trust and integrity, we don't want to make this process a barrier, so that if somebody has a complaint, we don't want to make it, that tough on them. Because, if they're bringing something to us, it's hard enough, to make the complaint, that we don't want to make it, that much of a barrier. So we want to make it as smooth and as seamless as possible, because you have to think about it. If you're bringing a complaint against somebody who's quote unquote part of a machine, that's, a fear enough. So if we can make it, like Carol said, as, transparency, and then also make it as seamless and as smooth as possible, that's another, component. If we can make it, in that sense, that will be helpful as well. And I definitely like, Carol bringing up that part about, as much as, we have integrity and, we, can put our biases aside. One of the things you have to think about if people, looking at us as a part of Urbana is like, how can Urbana investigate Urbana? So that's one of the things you want to kind of keep in mind as well. So I definitely appreciate Carol bringing that point. And then Pete also pointing out that if you keep it, kind of local in that sense, keeping it smooth so that they don't have that extra layer of barriers. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Pete, as well.
Very good. Thank you, Lolita.
Thanks. I'll definitely take that back when I discuss with Dan, and we'll see if we can come up with something that makes sense.
Okay, good. As we're talking about things that we began to initiate last week, I was wondering, Lisa, if you and Stacy had anything to report about plans for dealing with current racial justice issues. If you had any opportunity to do that.
Sure, I'd like to update you. So in the last month, I did reach out to Stacy. Stacy's idea is to do a small town hall meeting with the African American community to gather feedback and questions. She was going to reach out to local churches. Unfortunately, she had to move, was furloughed, and there were some other significant issues in the African American community, so we were not able to progress at this time. I've had some time to think. I definitely want to pursue that and keep the lines of communication open. I do want to just state that I feel like our approach compared to the Citizen Police Review Board is different, and we are looking at discrimination in regard to housing, health, employment, and that I'd like to look deeper into those systemic issues that are impacting any citizen of Urbana, but specifically, of course, our African American community, because they are vastly disproportionately affected by issues of discrimination in those areas. So hopefully we'll have more for you next month.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. Does anyone have any more comments about these projects of ours? Okay, moving on to the EEO workforce statistics, and in particular, Deuce Construction. Vasilia?
Well, I thought that you guys needed to discuss the Deuce Construction follow-up. I sent each of you the email that was sent from the company explaining that all of the positions that they have are union jobs. So even those jobs that are classified as unskilled, they get them through some type of bargaining unit source. So the question becomes, what do you want to do in terms of the numbers that they presented, and how much time you want to give for their recertification?
Okay. I'd just like to add that we've kind of run into a brick wall here, which is the fact that the reason for their poor numbers, despite their large municipal contract, is the fact that they get their labor from the unions. And this is a problem that's come up before in the past with other companies. And I think it's maybe time to decide how the commission wants to deal with that problem. If we want to try to influence the situation, and if so, at what is the proper point at which to apply pressure or to go in and try to make a change? Is it with the contractor? Is it with the union? Is it with the city somehow? Because at this point, when we see these figures, there's already a contract in place often, and that's certainly the case with Deuce. So what do we want to do about that? Pete.
So we've been dealing with this now for years on end.
Yes.
The same part of the ordinance that allows us to do these workforce statistic reviews for companies that have contracts with the city allows us to do the same sort of thing, do some sort of, check and verification and approval of the labor unions and labor organizations themselves. We have been shy about trying to take that on. I understand why we are shy about taking that on, but it's been going on for so long. I think we have to have a discussion with the labor unions about what kinds of affirmative action policies they've got in order to get their folks more diverse. And some of them may be doing a wonderful job, some of them may be doing a terrible job, and some of it may have to do with history and some may have to do with current practices, but we have no idea. We are flying blind. And so I think it's time to bite the bullet and say over the next, few months, however long we need to spend to come up with a procedure and talk to the unions and say, this is coming and what can we do about this? I think we have to start. I think the current state is not acceptable.
I agree with that. Does anyone else have anything to say about it? I would like to say that.
Carol, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carol. I see your hand. Please go ahead.
Sorry about that.
No.
So I agree wholeheartedly with Pete. I was on this board several years ago, left, came back. Back then, we were still talking about this. And I think at this point, it's time for us to start addressing the unions, because some of these companies really are at the mercy of the unions. If they, I won't even get into all the background stuff, but if we're ever going to actually have any kind of an impact, whether it's through information sharing, education, training, connecting unions to resources, because I can already tell you what the unions are going to say is the problem. But I think we've got to get in the mix and start helping people, I guess, nudging them towards solutions. Because and I mean, maybe nudging with a bulldozer, but it's time to move past the companies, especially some of these smaller companies that don't have, 500 employees or whatever. It's always the unions, and I don't know. I, for one, I'm so discouraged every time I drive past a construction site and I don't see any people of color, or maybe 1 out of 20, and even less African Americans or Hispanics. You might see 1 female. It's very disheartening, and I think for me right now, there's a lot of conversations that are coming up across the globe, but in particular in the United States, around social unrest and social justice issues, and the conversations around why are young African American youth, in particular males, so angry, and why are they doing this to their community? I'm a grown woman. I'm 53 years old, and it bothers me to see all of these buildings going up and all this work being done in our community. We are not a work poor community. Champaign-Urbana is unique in central Illinois, and a lot of it is because of the university in Carl, and a couple of other larger entities. But I can only imagine, as an African American youth or a Hispanic youth, to walk around or ride your bicycle or be in the car with your friends, and you're looking for work and you're stuck in these, fast food service industry jobs, which, great. I encourage anyone to work. Just get a job and work. And, as Martin Luther King Jr. once said, even if you're a street sweeper, be the best one you can be. But people can only take so much, and the frustration is going to come out in some way, shape, or form. When you have people feeling disenfranchised and feeling like they're looking around and seeing everyone else pass them by, they're going to be angry. And I'm just really to the point where I don't want to hear anymore about we can't diversify because of the union. Let's go to the unions. And how we do that and what that looks like, I'll leave it to the experts. I'm looking at Pete.
Carol, do you think you take this on though? Because Pete's already doing something else. Is that something you'd be willing to look into?
Yes. I got to put my money where my mouth is, but I'm not an expert on unions.
Nobody here is.
To be honest, although I'll definitely send you the ordinance section, which talks about all this stuff.
Okay.
But yeah.
I would just like to add to that, though. I don't think it's a good idea to give up on the companies and give them a pass, or even give the city a pass.
No, we got to apply the pressure to everybody, but I think we got to move. We have to include the unions. It can't just be about the companies anymore. No, I would never say let them pass.
No, and no, we can go, but I think pressure coming from the companies, if they really thought their business was in danger, that they weren't going to get this $1 million contract. If the city thought twice before it gave such a contract, you might see a change. That might help you see a change in the unions, because they don't. Otherwise, they might lose their influence, and they go to non-union labor. And I don't want to see that, because I believe in the labor union movement. But the way these particular unions are behaving is they could use some pressure. And I think that the companies and the city should be our allies in making changes with the unions, not just us alone going out to them.
So,
I'm not sure how that would look, but
when this topic has come up before, and because we had, and I'm forgetting which company it was that we invited in to talk about.
A&R.
A&R. And they actually, their leadership seemed pretty sympathetic to helping us put pressure, but I can't imagine them going at this solo. I think the city needs to be on board and talk
Yes.
to Public Works and make sure that they make it crystal clear that we're going to start not having contracts available to union labor if the unions do not step up and do something.
They have to make the same good faith effort that
That's
would require of anybody.
That's right. So yeah, I totally agree with you, but I do think those folks are out there that are willing to help out.
Yes. I agree. But, you know, historically, we've just sort of limped along and it hasn't changed anything. We have to change our approach. And this is a great conversation. Thank you, Carol and Pete and Lisa.
Well, thank you guys too. And I just I want to add one more thing because I think we're seeing something happening in this country. I can't speak for the rest of the world, although they've joined us in solidarity, but we are seeing movement happening and not just lip service. And I think when you hear people say things like, what difference are you making? What are you doing? I want to be able to say that we're making a difference. I know that we've made a difference in individual lives that have brought things before us, but community-wide, I think a huge place for us to do some advocacy and some education is this whole union issue, because this is a unique community. And I think, like I said, I have 2 African-American sons. Despite me and my ex both having degrees, they both chose not to go to college. I would like to think that they could still make a good, decent, honest living and not have to be on welfare because they didn't want to go, $90,000 in debt to get a degree. But honestly, I don't know that. And we know that the service trades pay well. And we have a significant portion of our community stuck in service jobs that don't pay well. My son came home the other day. He had a letter in the mail telling him he'd gotten a raise. He was so excited because of the minimum wage raise. But I was just like, oh my God, you're never going to get out of my house. He's 19, but I'm like, I want you to be able to sustain yourself and live on your own. He couldn't do that in this community. The cost of living is too high. So again, as a mother, as a member of the community, as a member of this board, I think it's time for us to move beyond. Because honestly, I don't feel comfortable saying no to somebody who's applying for a city contract, because I feel like in most cases, it's almost a done deal because they've already done it before. Mm-hmm. So when we extend the time, we're just inevitably at some point we end up caving and letting them continue the contract. So
that's right. But when the city gives a contract, they can at least talk about this, perhaps. I mean, it should be higher on the radar, the issue that the city supports and wants to see diversity and a reflection of the community. Pete.
So getting back to brass tacks, yes. I'd like to make a motion that we only approve Deuce Construction for 6 months by way of incentive for us to get on this, with the understanding that, they are a union shop, they're bringing in union folks, that's their issue. And, we want to work with them. On the other hand, we do need to move this, how do we address the union issue along? And so I would like to at least have a 6-month deadline where this is going to come back and, bite us in the butt if we don't do something about it within the next 6 months.
Very good. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. I know that the approvals are coming up in the next section. So why don't we?
Oh, well, so this was just a discussion of dues. Okay. I will withdraw my motion for the time being.
Okay, thank you.
Bring it
Yeah,
up.
right. I just realized we are,
Sorry about that.
oh, I'm very strict about these things. Okay, new business. Unless anyone has a further comment about where we're going to move on this. Good. Okay. New business, Vasilia, the workforce statistics.
Okay, well, since we been talking about Deuce, I think we have another company that probably is pretty much in the same category in terms of lack of diversity in their workforce, and basically has historically been not had a very good showing in terms of minority employees, and that's this Davis Hook Mechanical. I don't know if any of you guys remember seeing them come with their statistical information, but one of the things that I noticed about them, and I focus pretty much on the employees that will be working for Urbana, and they have a total of 124 employees that will be assigned to the Urbana project, but only one minority out of that 124. And since I'm not in the office, I wasn't able to look back in their files to see historically what their numbers have been, but I remember that they are another company that is worrisome in terms of minority representation. So I had initially recommended that both Davis and Deuce may be given a year, but I certainly understand why you might want them back in 6 months so that you can take a look and basically motivate yourselves to stay on track and address this lacking with these two companies. The other company is Andrew Technology, and that is a company that the city is planning to buy a time and attendance system from. They have 12 people that will be on the Urbana project, and they have one African American and one Hispanic employee within that 12. So I recommended 2 years for them.
Okay. Do we have a motion on the recommendations and on the approvals we're going to give?
Well, if you
Now's
don't
your time, Pete.
an omnibus motion, I will move that we approve Davis Hoke for 6 months, Andrew Technology for 2 years, and Deuce Construction for 6 months.
Very good. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? Any comments? Okay, we will have a roll call vote.
Carol Bradford,
I approve.
Lolita Dumas,
I approve.
Lisa Mosley,
I approve.
Peter Resnick,
Approved?
Francis Rigberg.
I approve. The motion carries. And is that it? Vasilia, anything else?
Well, I just wanted to mention during the month of June there, and being out of the office with this COVID has really been a challenge, but we've had 4 inquiries into the office, none of which falls the jurisdiction of their problems fell within the Urbana Human Rights Ordinance. We had one gentleman who contacted the office because of fraudulent banking information. His information had gotten out, and it's a whole mess. And so anyway, I referred him to the sheriff's office. Another person who was looking for housing for her mom, I connected her with the community development department, because sometimes the city has property that they rent out, Section 8 low income kinds of situations. And I had another gentleman who contacted the office who had a complaint about his employer as it related to COVID. And he was referred to the public health department. So That's pretty much the activity in terms of complaints or inquiries that came directly to the office.
Thank you, Cecilia. Okay, now we move on to announcements. And do we want, I would take this opportunity to say that the commission usually doesn't meet in August. How do we feel about that? Do we want to not meet in August or meet in August? Because traditionally that's our vacation month.
Given the lack of going on vacations,
Yes, we're all
I
heading
don't
out.
mind one way or the other, but if people want to staycate, I will understand that too.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment? Yes.
One other quick thing on that, and I know we consistently forget to do this, but once a year we're supposed to redo the elections of officers.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's meant to happen in July, but you know, I just wanted to make sure that that was out there and someone was tracking when we do that.
Okay, Lisa.
I would like to take August off, just looking at trying to prepare for going back to school in the fall.
Sure.
There's a lot we are trying to
Oh, yeah.
put into place, but that would be only me. And if the rest of the team wants to meet, so be it.
Okay, anybody else want to say, okay.
I vote to take August off. This is
All right. I think we know where we're headed with this. You're already on vacation, clearly, on the beach there. That's where I'd like to be. Okay, there will be no meeting in August, and we will meet again in September. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.